marriage, family, child rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes I can't believe I get to talk to the people that I get to talk to on this program, because so many are doing so many wonderful and positive things for the country. And that's very true of my guests today on the program. First of all, we're going to kind of relate everything to this 2-day-old Trump administration. And one of the issues surrounding that, of course, has been the issue of TikTok. It's been in the news, and will there be a TikTok after a period of time? I'm going to talk a little bit later in the program with really someone who has been dealing for decades on internet safety. And TikTok, the problems with TikTok are internet safety, sort of the toxic content that can be found there. But also the big reason for the U.S. Congress banning it or saying it had to be sold to an American company is national security and just the ability to scoop up all kinds of information on users. So with me to talk about TikTok and internet safety as a whole is going to be, a little bit later in the program, Donna Rice Hughes. She is CEO and president of Enough is Enough. And then, of course, the new administration has already reversed much of the sort of climate change related, which is a misnomer. I'm so glad we'll perhaps be able to get rid of that term, because the climate changes all the time. But to get rid of some of the policies with regard to that, the Green New Deal, we've already taken steps to pull out of the Paris Climate Accords. And so we will be talking about that with Carla Sands, who she's done many things. She's an amazing person, but she has been the U.S. ambassador under the first Trump administration to Denmark, and she is an expert on Greenland, which is pretty much controlled by Denmark now, but President Trump would like to see greater ties with the United States. And so, that's been kind of an issue that's been previewed in the run-up to the inauguration. But we will talk with Carla Sands about it, Ambassador Carla Sands. And also, she's with the America First Policy Institute, and she's been working on environmental and energy policy. So all of these orders, executive orders that are coming out from the Trump administration right now, I know she's been working on it. So I'm so excited to talk with her also. And, something else that was announced today was that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion personnel in the U.S. government, which there are a lot of them, and we spend a lot of money on it, and it causes so many problems. They basically are being given administrative leave, paid leave. They'll be gone, and I think they're going to be gone by the end of today. So I'm going to talk about that on the program. I do want to mention that today is the anniversary of Roe versus Wade. So we think of this as sort of a time to, even though we don't have Roe versus Wade anymore, we think of it as a time to talk about the sanctity of human life. There have been 65 million abortions done under that Roe regime. When Roe was struck down by the Dobbs decision, we had we had some disappointing actions from some of the states. Actually, implement some states that are kind of reddish or purplish, like Kansas, that implemented draconian laws allowing abortion all the way to the moment of birth, and really striking down many of the restrictions the state already had on abortion. Now, in the last election, we had 3 states that actually beat back those kinds of bills. So there was some movement in the right direction. But the bottom line to those comments is that the pro-life movement is still needed, and it's still very strong. And there are some events that are taking place in Washington, D.C. this week, because it's Sanctity of Life Week. Today, of course, is the anniversary. And although it's been overturned, Roe versus Wade has been overturned, January 22nd, 1973 is a day that will live in infamy. And that is the day, of course, that 7 unelected men approved abortion throughout pregnancy for any reason. And it led to the figure that I mentioned earlier, 65 million children, and the wounding of millions of mothers and fathers who underwent abortion. And so there is a group of pro-life organizations today who hosted, this has already taken place, a prayer vigil outside the courthouse. It was about noon today, Eastern time, and it memorialized the children who were victims of the Roe decision, and the people that were gathered there were praying for those who have been physically or emotionally harmed by abortion. So those prayers went out today. So that's what happened. And then we talked earlier in the week. I was on the show on Monday, and I spoke with a representative from the March for Life, which still goes on post-Dobbs, and that will take place in D.C. on Friday, the 24th. And they're going to have a protest tomorrow outside Planned Parenthood's Carol Whitehill Moses Center, also in D.C. So every day, today, tomorrow, and Friday, these events are taking place in Washington, D.C., and they're going to have a press conference tomorrow. It's going to focus on the need to defund Planned Parenthood and the entire abortion industry, which I think is very important under the Trump administration. It really needs to happen. So that center where pro-lifers are going to meet is the D.C. headquarters of the nation's largest abortion business, Planned Parenthood. And Planned Parenthood still receives state funding from certain states across the nation. I think there's some federal funding, and certainly we need to see complete defunding of abortion under the Trump administration. And I think that will. I really have, even though that was not an issue that was talked about a lot in the run-up to the inauguration, and certainly in the election, the Trump campaign basically kind of stayed away from the issue for reasons that we probably all kind of could see. It was such a big issue in the losses in Congress in 2022. So, but it's still an administration that I believe will protect the sanctity of human life. But it's going to take the pro-life movement to really stay on top of it and to really communicate the need to protect the sanctity of human life. And President Trump said he was saved from assassination attempts by God for a reason. And that is one of the reasons we in this country cannot be a nation that supports the death culture that abortion brings, that Planned Parenthood brings. And so, every pro-lifer that I have on the air, that I come in contact with, I always encourage to stay with the fight because it's an important one. Well, next up, we're going to talk about some of the things coming out of this White House. Stay with us for more of Point of View.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
The year 1776 changed the Western world in significant ways. That is the conclusion of Andrew Wilson, pastor of King's Church in London, in his book, Remaking the World. He was on my radio program to discuss his book.
He explains that the big idea of this book is that 1776, more than any other year in the last millennium, is the year that made us who we are. He describes it as a year that witnessed 7 transformations taking place: globalization, the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, the Great Enrichment, the American Revolution, the rise of post-Christianity, and the dawn of Romanticism. He describes this society as one relative to others, past and present, is weirder. Each letter is an acronym. He concludes that the vast majority of people in human history have not shared our views about work, family, government, religion, sex, identity, or morality. W stands for Western and focuses on the issue of globalization. One key event is the voyage of Captain James Cook. His travels generated certain questions like, why were some natives more advanced than others? Western society began to get into the deep roots of culture and wondered why Western society developed before other cultures. E stands for Educated and focuses on the impact of the Enlightenment. Obviously, the Enlightenment started nearly a century before, but one high point was 1776. That was the year that Immanuel Kant drafted his Critique of Pure Reason and the year that Edward Gibbon published his Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Tomorrow, we'll look at other events in 1776 that led to the remaking of our world. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free booklet on a biblical view of genetic engineering, go to viewpoints.info/genetic engineering. Viewpoints.info/genetic engineering. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter. Kelly Shackelford just sent me an email with an article, linked to it from Fox News. Another piece of news. There's so much news coming out of the Trump White House right now. This one says the U.S. State Department has adopted a new policy under the Trump administration that effectively blocks U.S. embassies and outposts from flying Pride and Black Lives Matter flags. This is a new report. The Washington Free Beacon reported that it obtained a copy of the One Flag Policy Order, which permits only the American flag to be flown at U.S. facilities at home and abroad, with two notable exceptions. One of them is the Prisoner of War Missing in Action, POW MIA emblem. That can be flown, and the wrongful detainees flag. But other than that, starting immediately, only the United States of America flag is authorized to be flown or displayed at U.S. facilities, both domestic and abroad, and featured in U.S. government content. This is a memo that the Washington Free Beacon got a hold of. The flag of the United States of America, this memo says, united all Americans under the universal principles of justice, liberty, and democracy. These values, which are the bedrock of our great country, are shared by all American citizens, past and present. And, you know, we've been a bit... well, there's been controversy over some of the flags that have been flown because they represent perhaps the views of the former administration on LGBT issues and also on sort of the Black Lives Matter type of Marxism and all of that. So none of that will be now transmitted across the world from the United States of America, and I think that's a good thing. It's also very interesting, and let me find the article on this, but on the on the day of the inauguration, it was also the opening day of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. And so, that's kind of an interesting, I don't know. I think it was interesting that all the tech titans were at the inauguration, but they could have been at Davos, but they chose to be at President Trump's inauguration. And something that's happened, and I can't seem to find my article on it, but I was reading in the Wall Street Journal this morning that many of the sort of billionaire company heads at Davos, you would think, they were actually trying to figure out how to get around Donald Trump's policies here in the U.S. when he was during his first administration. But now a lot of them are more optimistic because they're seeing, of course, that perhaps their companies and just the economy, the world economy as a whole, could benefit from some of America's policies that Donald Trump actually might bring forward. And of course, you're seeing him this time acting so fast, so quickly. And here, I found the Wall Street Journal piece. It says that global elite gird for Trump 2.0. So they're saying this one, I just think it's kind of funny, the turnaround that you see. Norway's foreign minister, and his name is Espen Barth Eide. Probably not pronouncing it right. He says, we've learned that he goes out maximalist, and then he starts negotiating. Of course, he talks about tariffs. He talks about now, I guess, removing, reconsidering all foreign aid. And, he doesn't want a lot of warmongering and, the endless wars position that he's taken against those. So, they see that he does. He begins with a very, very bold, bright line, and sometimes there's a negotiation. It's called the art of the deal. But anyway, this foreign minister for Norway says we've learned that he goes out maximalist, and then he starts negotiating. This wasn't really known to us last time. This is now factored in. And so this was during an interview that happened at Davos this week. He said he has learned to take Trump seriously, but not always literally. If we run around commenting on every Truth Social post, we will have nothing else to do. He said he still has questions such as how Trump would handle Ukraine. I think a lot of us have questions about that, and I think it depends on what happens. U.S. support for for NATO. That's another question they have, and they're probably all wondering what that's going to be like. I think most of his position is that he wants everybody else to, especially the European countries, to be sure that they support NATO with not only their money, and he was somewhat successful in getting them to ante up a little bit more. But there's more progress to be made there, but also just with their militaries and to actually take responsibility for some of their own security. But again, this particular leader from Norway said, we will go in and discuss this with the new administration and see. That posture, says the Wall Street Journal, is widespread in Davos, marking a contrast to 2017 when Trump sent shockwaves and unease through many corporate boardrooms and foreign capitals. Now, 8 years later, many top diplomatic officials and titans of business are greeting Trump's second presidency with cautious optimism. That he can help advance their interests. Some of them describe the 45th and 47th president's desire for more nationalist U.S. immigration and trade policies as an expected and not surprising part of the bargain of doing business with the U.S. So they understand that Trump puts America first. And there are going to be times when that is actually better for their countries, too. In fact, it should be better. Chief executive of the information technology company Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. His name is Antonio Neri, and he says he's optimistic about the incoming Trump administration. He says it's still early, but he says he thinks the U.S. is incredibly well poised to take advantage of these massive inflection points, such as artificial intelligence. And again, in the last day or so, there's been an announcement of the AI program that the UI is going to implement that's going to basically put the United States, a huge investment of money and many people hired into it, so as to, I guess, get a framework for how AI is going to be implemented. And I think that's a good thing. The Biden administration was a little more just negative on it and wanting to control it and wanting to, kind of put some restrictions. And I'm sure there will be some restrictions, but it's seen more as an opportunity. And so, of course, we conservatives will be watching closely, but he's putting some big money and some very highly placed experts on the job. So that will be, a discussion point at Davos, also at the World Economic Forum. Trump was sworn in, of course, as president, as I mentioned, on the opening day of this conference. And in Washington, you saw seated behind Trump, they were, in prominent positions where everybody could see, even those watching on TV, were a plethora of CEOs there. Of course, Sundar Pichai of Google. I don't even know if I'm saying his name right, but I can say Mark Zuckerberg from Meta. I can say Elon Musk from Tesla and all the other companies, and also the head of Doge. And I can mention several others. There are several tech titans that were there. Jeff Bezos of the Washington Post, and certainly Amazon. So they were there, and they are cooperating with President Trump. And so, at least initially here in this administration, there's good relationships with them, and we're going to hopefully see also the draconian and heavy hand of censorship lifted from social media, and I hope that really truly happens. And I guess that's why I have a bit of a light heart today, because I see a lot of positive things coming out of the White House. Perhaps there are some things that you disagree with, and we'll take your calls later in the program about that, or that you like. In the final two segments of the program, we will do that. We'll hold some open lines. But next up, we are going to talk a bit about TikTok and also about internet safety and how to protect our kids online with an expert on it, Donna Rice Hughes. I'm so thankful that she was able to join me today. She's very busy in what she does, but she's doing some good work out there, so you won't want to miss it. Stick with us for more of Point of View.
It almost seems like we live in a different world from many people in positions of authority. They say men can be women and women men. People are prosecuted differently or not at all, depending on their politics. Criminals are more valued and rewarded than law-abiding citizens. It's so overwhelming, so demoralizing. You feel like giving up. But we can't. We shouldn't. We must not. As Winston Churchill said to Britain in the darkest days of World War II, never give in, never give in, never, 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 never yield to force, never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy. And that's what we say to you today. This is not a time to give in, but to step up and join Point of View in providing clarity in the chaos. We can't do it alone, but together, with God's help, we will overcome the darkness. Invest in biblical clarity today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to Point of View. Last week, this issue got a little bit lost in, I think, the inaugural festivities and the upcoming inauguration of President Trump. But there was a case at the Supreme Court that's quite interesting. And last week, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton went to Washington, D.C. to argue a case before the Supreme Court. While he was there, he attended a couple of the inaugural balls, pre-inauguration balls that took place over the weekend. But before that, he was, last Wednesday, a week ago today, he was to argue before the Supreme Court on a case. And he took his tux for the balls, but he forgot his suit. So apparently he argued this case before the U.S. Supreme Court in a tux. And so, that was, I guess, maybe indicative of the importance or formality of the issue. But the case that he argued had to do with a law that Texas passed back in 2023. This law says that pornography purveyors, which are websites whose content is more than 1/3 sexual material harmful to minors, that they must use reasonable age verification methods. This was the Texas law was HB 1181, and it was actually introduced by my state representative, Matt Shaheen, who's been on this program several times. If you include the Texas House and the Texas Senate, that law requiring age verification of minors accessing pornography, it passed 164-1. It also, a similar law, well, many states have passed similar laws. One was Louisiana. It passed 130-1. Virginia passed the same kind of a law, 134-2, and Arkansas, Utah, Utah passed laws unanimously. These laws are protective of minors, and they force the websites to verify the age of those using them. The lead challenger challenging this law was a group called the Free Speech Coalition. It's an adult entertainment industry group, and it argues in this case that age verification is too great a burden on the First Amendment rights of adult Texans. So you can't protect kids because you're infringing on the rights of adults who want to use pornography. So Texas argues that through smartphones, and I'm quoting from now Texas's, I believe it's the brief or the testimony. Through smartphones, children have instantaneous access to unlimited amounts of adult hardcore pornography. And I did find out that part of the facts of this case are that 53% of children have a smartphone by age 11. I think that's not a good thing, whether you're considering porn or not. But it's the truth. And so these kids, they can find content and they can do it totally unsupervised by their own parents. And so the sites have to bear some responsibility for verifying the age of these kids using it. There's one argument against it, though, requiring it on ID online opens the risk of hacking. So in other words, if the child had to give some kind of an ID, they're at risk of being hacked because their information is out there. But some sites take credit cards anyway. I mean, they're in it to make money, right? So you've already got that risk out there. That's really a bogus argument. And this case was argued. Ken Paxton, he's a brilliant attorney general of Texas. Texas passes some of the most protective laws for kids on these issues. And so now we're about waiting for what the Supreme Court does. I understand the people that listen to the arguments that it sounded like it went pretty well for Texas. So that's good. But it is a state law telling websites that they need to screen for minors. And so I'm glad that it sounded positive. And usually we hear these verdicts, these rulings come down in like May or June. So that's probably what will happen. The Texas Free Speech Coalition that was suing against this Texas law, they lost their court battle at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. They appealed the case, which is now at the Supreme Court. And, of course, the outcome, it will go well beyond Texas. This is what Mary Elizabeth Castle says, and she is with Texas Values. Texas passed the age verification law because our state understands that giving kids unfettered access to pornography is detrimental to their development, their relationships, and how they view themselves. After passing this life-saving law, we must continue the fight for Texas kids at the Supreme Court. And the reason Texas Values put out a press release on this is they signed on to an amicus brief for this case with other state family policy councils. So, there's a chance that we could get another level of protection for kids as the Supreme Court takes up obscenity. Mike Ferris, who's a friend of our program, also weighed in on this. He is general counsel for the National Religious Broadcasters, and he talks about the oral arguments. He was probably there because he lives in the D.C. and he works in the D.C. area for NRB. And he says the porn industry concedes that the goal of the Texas law is constitutionally legitimate. So even the porn industry admits that it's legitimate to try to get an age, some sort of age verification for people using their porn services. But their lawyers contend that the operation of the law would interfere with the right of adults to access constitutionally protected speech. In other words, it's okay to protect the kids, but not if it interferes with the right of adults to access porn. The questioning in the case seemed to lead, says Mike Ferris, slightly in favor of upholding the Texas law. But this outcome will require the court to either limit or reverse a prior decision that struck down a law of Congress. But maybe it's good that we would actually reverse that law because it was we need it to be very protective of children. We live in a different environment before online porn and after. They're just very different because of the privacy that children have when they have a smartphone. This letter from Mike Ferris says it is true, according to the Supreme Court's definitions, there are certain levels of sexually explicit material that fall short of the legal definition of obscenity. But he says it's equally true that governments can prohibit such material from being sold or made available to minors. So this is the question. We've had some basically timid prosecutors, Mike Ferris says, vis-a-vis obscenity, to just kind of try to push the theory that this material is protected by the Constitution. And adults have a right to obtain it, but kids shouldn't be using it. And so we need to take strong stances against that, and we will be doing that. And certainly there's a lot more that needs to be done about online content. One of those things is TikTok. And we still really don't know exactly what is going to happen because it went dark. As most of you know, we talked about this on Friday here on Point of View. It went dark. And the kids, it's mostly young people that use TikTok, they were upset and sad about it and not happy about losing, sort of an activity that they spend hours a day doing sometimes. But when Trump came back, there is, I guess, embedded in the law that Congress passed that bans TikTok or says it has to be sold to an American company, there's a time frame. There's an extension of time to allow that happen, and Trump has taken advantage of that. He issued an executive order not to enforce TikTok's penalties against companies that host the TikTok app for 75 days. So that's where we are right now with TikTok. This is to provide for really in the law while challenging the law in court. TikTok rebuffed many potential people that wanted to buy them. So they didn't even talk to those people. Well, now they are talking to potential buyers, and Trump is talking about some kind of deal. Now, any deal that Trump or others make on TikTok has to comply with the law that was recently passed by Congress, which provides, quote, the establishment or maintenance of any operational relationship with a foreign nation is prohibited. So China ByteDance cannot be involved in TikTok in order for it to remain online here in the United States. And, if that changes, it's going to have to thread a lot of needles legally. So I'm thinking that there will be something that happens if TikTok is saved with the private buyers and sub-company that cuts China and ByteDance totally out of the equation. Let's hope so. Stick with us for more A Point of View.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter, and I have to apologize because I did preview a couple of guests that were going to join me today on the program, and we're having technical issues, so I haven't been able to connect up with them, and I'm hoping that that changes pretty soon. But I do want to, because I was talking about internet porn, especially childhood safety on the internet. Let's put it that way. That's more the issue. And this article popped up when I was kind of looking at this issue in anticipation of my interview. But the title of the article is "It Stole My Childhood." Wow. I guess she means the toxic content online. And this is, it's a story about Taylor Mathoka, who was first exposed to pornography at the age of 7. A friend showed it to her online, and all the children had to do to access the website was check a box saying they were 18. Little did she know that moment would lead to a 10-year addiction. That one moment of exposure stole my innocence, she said, and stole my childhood with no barriers in place and no meaningful age verification. So this was part of the evidence for age verification requirements for porn companies, porn websites. And Representative Mary Miller, who's a Republican from Illinois and advocates for these age verification laws, provided this article. The one moment of exposure stole my innocence. It stole my childhood, says Taylor. With no barriers in place, no meaningful age verification, I was exposed to violent and disturbing content that no one should ever see, especially not a child. She's now a wife and mother and founder of Freedom Hub, which is a nonprofit dedicated to ending human trafficking. And she went to speak at the Supreme Court a week ago today, last Wednesday, and it was freezing then, and she braved freezing temperatures to get there because you have to walk up a lot of steps. It is cold right now in D.C. And she went to the Supreme Court, and she urged it to declare a Texas law requiring age verification to access porn websites constitutional. So this is the case, again, we've been talking about it, Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton. And the High Court's going to decide whether the age verification law violates free speech rights. So, there were lots of different good testimonies from different groups to talk about this. But Terry Schilling from the American Principles Project said this is not a conservative versus liberal thing. As a matter of fact, it really isn't. It's not partisan. It's not political. And I think there was a coalition against pornography under the Reagan administration that he formed, that people that we know, like Alan Sears from Alliance Defending Freedom, like Mark Levin, who has this nationwide radio program, and Ed Meese. They were all part of this pornography commission. And those people that I'm mentioning are conservative, but there were people from the left there too, because porn is bad for everybody's kids, and it's really something that a nation should do all they can to prosecute when it's illegal, and other times strengthen the laws, which they're trying to do right now. This member of Congress, though, Mary Miller from Illinois, she is founder of the Congressional Family Caucus, and she introduced a bill called SCREEN, Shielding Children's Retinas from Egregious Exposure on the Net. So they have to figure out a way to make these acronyms work, and so they use the word retina. I like that. So she says this bill, this act, I think she wrote the bill, and at least she introduced it to require all commercial pornography websites to adopt age verification technology. She says, I'm a strong supporter of the First Amendment, and I appreciate the right to speak today in front of the Supreme Court, but the First Amendment does not give predatory companies the right to produce obscene content that can be accessed by minor children. And she made a good point. Websites for alcohol and tobacco require age verification. They don't seem to be worried about hacking on those. But she said online for these obscene materials need to be treated the same way. I hope you agree with that, and will make your voice heard when issues like that come before our government, our lawmakers, and it's just going to be a lot of fun, I think, to see. I mean, I see so many gratifying things coming out of the Trump administration right now, but to see what Congress is able to do, even with a very narrow House of Representatives. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there are many, many bills that are executive orders, and it was so much fun I guess it was Monday evening, to watch, even late into the evening before probably making Melania and Donald Trump late to the balls that were out there, the inaugural balls. But he was just sitting there in the Oval Office with reporters, and he was signing executive order after executive order after executive order. And, with all kinds of energy and enthusiasm, and just really, really kind of playing it up with as only Donald Trump can do. And so, a lot of those now we're starting to see. We're starting to see the news that they're being acted upon. So here's one of the surprising things coming out of the administration. I thought, but I guess Trump has the gall to really do this. He's demanding that a bishop, an Episcopal bishop, the Right Reverend Marianne Budd, she leads the Episcopal Diocese of Washington, and I don't know if you saw this. But she gave a sermon at the National Prayer Service on Tuesday, and she said that she asked President Trump, she spoke directly to him, to have mercy on immigrants and gay and transgender children. She spoke at this service, and she definitely is known as a Trump hater, and Trump knows that. But he said she brought her church into the world of politics in a very ungracious way and was kind of nasty in tone and not compelling. He wants her to apologize because President Trump has now, of course, he has defined gender as, well, he said there's only two genders, male and female. And that's going to be the official policy for the United States government, and that's making, according to this bishop from the Episcopal Church, it's making them afraid. In fact, they're fearing for their lives over this, and also his immigration policies and the deportation of illegals that's about to take place. And of course, it's starting it's becoming clearer and clearer. It's starting with people who are actually criminals or have criminal records, who are terrorists, but she's worried about the law-abiding, hard-working immigrants that are in the U.S. that are fearing for their lives now and fearing for their position here in the United States. And part of this is, I don't mean to sound callous, but there's a new administration, and this administration is going to follow the rule of law, and sometimes some people get hurt with this. I don't think they're going to try to hurt people. What they're going to try to do is protect the homeland, protect the American citizen and American people, and do the best they can with others who are here. I really do think that is what's going to happen. Well, stick with us for more. I've got a lot more in my pile.
Have you ever met a child you knew would do great things? They displayed remarkable imagination, understanding, and a zest for learning. Now imagine someone takes that child and instead of fostering their potential with a real education, they feed them nothing but lies. That scenario isn't so far from reality. From a young age, Americans are fed a consistent stream of distorted facts, from the secular indoctrination they receive in many public schools, to the biases presented as fact in many colleges and universities, to the barrage of misinformation from the mainstream media and the lack of moral grounding in our society. It's not that Americans aren't capable of understanding the truth, it's that they aren't exposed to it enough. You can expose more Americans to the truth when you give to Point of View, where listeners receive facts, perspective, and biblical truth they don't get from society. As long as we have truth, we have hope. Give today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I do appreciate point of view and what you folks are doing. You really are doing a great job to educate and to help Christian folks do a better job to honor Christ in all that we do.
My husband and I are your supporters. We just really appreciate the show and the people you bring on.
I just want to commend you guys on your program. I love listening to you. It's a blessing. Been listening to you for several years. Your program has helped my family see current events and elections and politics through the eyes and the principles of Scripture. And that's been enlightening, and we're trying to pass that on to others.
I want to say, first of all, that I really enjoyed the Millennial Roundtable, and I love the program altogether. I think Kirby is great, and I really appreciate all of y'all, all that y'all do, and the truth that y'all put out.
Hey, great show. Love all your comments and what you're talking about.
Thanks again for what you do.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to Point of View. It's day two, at least the second full day of the Trump administration. We've been hearing a lot about actions the administration is taking, especially with regard to the subject, the huge topic of energy and climate. And a lot of it is quite gratifying. I have posted at pointofview.net a piece. Business and energy groups praise Trump's day one actions. And I do have an expert on that issue joining me now. Her name is Carla Sands. She is vice chair of the Center for Energy and Environment at America First Policy Institute. She's also chair of AFPI's Pennsylvania chapter. And in the first Trump administration, she was U.S. ambassador to the Kingdom of Denmark, which includes Greenland and the Faroe Islands. And her number one goal as ambassador there was to increase U.S. national security by establishing a consulate in Greenland. So we're going to discuss that. But first, Carla, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, I'm so happy to talk to you, Penna.
Well, I'm glad you're here. We had some technical issues, but just in time for my interview schedule with you, and I'm just thrilled about that because I know that you at America First Policy Institute, which has really been formulating policy for the second Trump administration, and of course they can do whatever they want, but it seems like they're doing some great things with regard to, for instance, announced today that we're pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords. Talk about that.
How much do we love that President Trump on day one pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accords and saved the American people about $1 trillion. But it also saves good-paying jobs, especially in the energy sector and in manufacturing, because Paris is going to require us to do things that we shouldn't do. We're a really good country when it comes to harvesting energy and manufacturing. We're the cleanest country in the world. We have very high standards, but we were also going to be transferring hundreds of billions to countries like China that aren't cleaning up their atmosphere, that are continuing to pollute, and are opening about 100 new coal-fired plants just this year.
So the other sort of part of this is the declaration of an energy emergency. What exactly does that mean?
That is so exciting. I actually had to go print it just so I could read it word for word and understand what President Trump is doing. And we at AFPI helped to write that executive order. What it does is it gives the president tremendous powers so that he can, and it's explicitly, and your listeners, if they're interested, can go and find it online, the executive order about President Trump's it's an emergency, the energy. And so what he can do is he is going to corral the DOD, the Energy Department, and the Interior Department to work together. And it does explicitly state in there Western states and Northeastern states that they don't have good energy policy. And what they've been doing is they've been blocking things like Pennsylvania has the Marcellus Shale, and we have shale gas, and we want to send it to New England, but we're not legally allowed to because New York blocks the pipeline that would take American energy to New England. So when that war broke out between Russia and Ukraine, when Russia invaded Ukraine, New England was heating their homes in the winter with Russian gas. Russian energy was being tankered to New England because America couldn't move our energy by pipe through New York to New England, and we weren't allowed to move it by vessel because we have the Jones Act. It has to be an American ship that does that, and we just don't have any longer the shipping capacity to send our energy from one state to another by water. We would have to use a foreign flag ship, and that's illegal. So New England was not able to use domestic energy. So President Trump sees the ridiculousness in that. He's a common sense president. He's going to break down all of these obstructionist governors and these laws that keep American energy out of certain areas. Look at California with their energy policy, their water policy, and what that's done, the havoc it's wreaked on a beautiful state like California. And things are going to change very quickly.
It seems like things are changing quickly. That's the interesting part about this. Just the competency of a person who's been successful in business, who was a successful president the first term, this time, because there was so much prep done by your organization and others, that he was ready to begin doing these things. Now, something else is the man you mentioned, California. Of course, they in their plans right now is that electrical vehicles will be the only kind of car you can get within just a very, very short time. And it's just unsustainable. And that is going to change under this Trump administration, right?
That's right. He has removed the EV mandate. California was trying to make policy for our whole country. And the kind of the Western world was following suit and going electric. But because and a lot of states like Virginia, Pennsylvania, Virginia withdrew from it. The governor there withdrew them from it. Connecticut, the Democrat governor withdrew Connecticut from this California EV mandate. But there are many other states that are still signed on to it. But I believe that President Trump ending the EV mandates, and then he's going to end those subsidies, I believe, the $7,500 cash back that people get when they purchase an EV, because when manufacturers make electric vehicles, they can't compete against combustion engine cars. They're more expensive to make. They also, people don't know this, they pollute more for the first 15 years of their lives than a combustion engine car. And you could say, well, how is that possible? It's because of the tons of mining and the refining. These are very dirty, polluting processes just to make an electric vehicle because of all of the rare earths and the components that go into making the battery. Tons and tons of mining for every single electric vehicle. And so combustion engine cars are more popular with Americans. We know that the president, the former president, President Biden, I think he dedicated around $7 billion to build electric vehicle charging stations throughout the country. And I think they got about 8 of them built for $7 billion. Government doesn't do things well. Private business does things well. And so it's very purposeful what President Trump is doing. But one of the things that the former Congress, the 118th Congress did, is they passed their first bill, was called H.R. 1. And it was really more than an energy bill. It did end the EV mandate. But it also
so that's already done.
Yes. And
wow.
So now
okay, let me jump in because we've got a break. But Carla, I didn't know that one. I want you to explain what Congress did, and we also want to ask you about the possibility of some kind of arrangement with Greenland, because you talk about these rare earth minerals. They've got them, and there are other reasons that Greenland and close ties with them would be positive, and you know that probably better than anyone. So I'm going to ask you about that after the break. But ladies and gentlemen, it's good news to hear from someone who's actually knows these policies and was hoping that they would be implemented, and now they are. So stick with us. We've got more explanation of them right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
The year 1776 changed the Western world in significant ways. That is the conclusion of Andrew Wilson, pastor of King's Church in London, in his book, Remaking the World. He was on my radio program to discuss his book. He explains that the big idea of this book is that 1776, more than any other year in the last millennium, is the year that made us who we are. He describes it as a year that witnessed 7 transformations taking place: globalization, the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, the Great Enrichment, the American Revolution, the rise of post-Christianity, and the dawn of Romanticism. He describes this society as one relative to others, past and present, is weirder. Each letter is an acronym. He concludes that the vast majority of people in human history have not shared our views about work, family, government, religion, sex, identity, or morality. W stands for Western and focuses on the issue of globalization. One key event is the voyage of Captain James Cook. His travels generated certain questions like, why were some natives more advanced than others? Western society began to get into the deep roots of culture and wondered why Western society developed before other cultures. E stands for Educated and focuses on the impact of the Enlightenment. Obviously, the Enlightenment started nearly a century before, but one high point was 1776. That was the year that Immanuel Kant drafted his Critique of Pure Reason, and the year that Edward Gibbon published his Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Tomorrow, we'll look at other events in 1776 that led to the remaking of our world. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free booklet on a biblical view of genetic engineering, go to viewpoints.info/genetic engineering. Viewpoints.info/genetic engineering. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
I'm Penna Dexter, and I am joined by phone by Carla Sands. She is vice chair of the Center for Energy and Environment, America First Policy Institute. I did mention that I posted an article on this issue at pointofview.net, the issue of energy. And one quote, the American Energy Alliance cataloged over 250 actions that former President Biden and his team took to make the production of American energy harder and more expensive. Carla, these are being undone piece by piece, aren't they?
Yes, or chunk by chunk. I mean, President Trump is rolling back a lot of President Biden's executive orders. He is clawing back that Green New Deal money that taxpayers don't want to spend. It's mostly cronyism where, President Biden was giving deals to his buddies, often Democrat donors, kind of like Cylinder 2.0. We don't want that in America. We actually want our government to stay in its lane and do what it's supposed to do, defend us, make sure the roads and bridges are working well, and more or less stay out of our lives and certainly leave our faith alone. And I think that President Trump is reasserting a traditional American government, and I think this is the most consequential presidency since George Washington's because of what he's doing and how our country was really on the wrong track, profoundly off course, and becoming something that for people like me, adults, fully formed adults, I didn't even recognize our country and what the government was mandating and doing. And it was really scary to me because I have a daughter that I care about. She's in her 20s, and I want her to be able to enjoy the freedoms that I enjoyed growing up. And so I really feel like President Trump is bringing our country back on course. And I think because of this, he will help to bring the world back on course, because the world is on fire right now. And the Biden administration and Obama administration before that administration was sending a lot of, I would say, un-American and certainly anti-faith stuff around the world, and tying aid and trade to anti-American, anti-traditional American concepts.
You mentioned the Congress already passing H.R. 1, is it?
Yes. Well, 118th Congress passed H.R. 1,
okay.
And it was about unleashing American energy. And it had things like reducing permitting time, so people that want to do a project can get that project okayed, and they don't do something called denial by delay, where they just keep delaying a project so you can never get there. It limits the lawfare, its lawsuits, as war against energy projects or also development projects by these green groups that are sometimes funded by leftist billionaires or foreign governments that want to stop American progress. Remember, the left, the real left, like the Biden administration was, is really anti-human and about deindustrializing America and the West. They didn't want good energy projects. They didn't want our country to be great. And right now we are on track to become even greater than we were.
Yes, I mentioned before you joined me that the Davos World Economic Forum is going on right now. In fact, it started the day the president was inaugurated. And there's a whole shift in attitude there among leaders. Some of them aren't madly in love with some of the policies, tariffs, and different things that Trump has announced, but they also realize he starts big and there's a negotiation to be had. But many of them saw the results from the first administration, and they also see the way he's hitting the ground running, and many of them seem very optimistic.
Well, I heard the statements by the German Prime Minister Olaf Scholz, and he basically said, look, we have freedom of speech in Germany, but not freedom of speech for the far right. People that want to limit immigration are considered far right by him. People that want legal immigration in Germany. Germany's changing as a country. Its culture's changing. Its demographics are changing because of the international organizations like the UN that are forcing Western countries, including the U.S., no longer, but were forcing us to have unlimited, unbridled immigration. And taxpayers were paying for that illegal immigration to bring folks in, to pay, to give them a roof over their heads, food, social benefits, free education, a free cell phone, and then cash cards. Well, that stopped on President Trump's watch. And I believe that's why European elections are changing. Governments are changing in Europe because of the illegal immigration, largely, and they're not coming from majority Christian countries like American immigration has been. It's mostly Muslim majority countries. And so that's also, upsetting the culture of these European countries that are nominally Christian still.
Carla, you may have to say no to this, but I'm wondering if, because we actually our interview is supposed to end at the bottom of the hour, I wonder if you could give me 15 more minutes because I have so many things to ask you.
I can give you about 5 more.
Okay,
and
good.
We had
Good.
Okay, but
okay.
when I was ambassador to Denmark, the Kingdom of Denmark, about 3% of the Danish people go to church on a weekly basis. It is the least Christian country in Europe.
Oh, that must have been fun for you.
Well, it was interesting. Whenever I would post something on social media that was pro-faith, I would get the most hate, and vitriol would be when I would post things like that.
All right. Well, speaking from your ambassadorship, I do want to talk about, because along the way, before this recent election and since then, also, there's been this interest expressed by President Trump in having some sort of, buying Greenland or having some sort of arrangement with Greenland, which was under your purview, or at least part of your responsibilities there when you were ambassador. And, some people just thought it was crazy, but it's not a bizarre idea, is it?
Well, it's not. He's the third U.S. president to propose this. And Denmark is a kingdom, so it has three countries in its kingdom. It has Denmark, the small country in northern Europe, and then Greenland, the world's largest island. It's just off our northeast coast, and it's a third the size of the continental U.S., with only 57,000 people residing there. And then there's the Faroe Islands, and they're just north of Scotland, up in the subarctic region.
Wow. So Greenland, I guess I didn't realize that it was that large, a third the size of the United States.
Yes.
We did buy the Virgin Islands at one point from Denmark. So,
Yes,
buying
it's a little
Greenland is
over-
one thing, or you could have an arrangement.
Yeah, just a little over 100 years ago, we bought the U.S. Virgin Islands from Denmark for about $100 million. But Greenland is semi-autonomous, so it doesn't belong to Denmark, but Denmark has the competencies for its security and for its foreign policy. And the problem is why I got concerned when I got to Denmark as ambassador was that Greenland is not protected by Denmark because they don't have the capacity. It'd be like saying to Colorado, about the same size GDP and population, okay, go protect Greenland. They just can't do it. They don't have the money or the resources, the manpower, and they have never developed Greenland. It's been languishing up there in the Arctic, and there's not even a road between two towns in Greenland. There is zero development. Most of the development there, buildings and things like that, whatever ports they have were built by the U.S. military when we occupied Greenland during World War II, and then kept a presence there through the Cold War, to the end of the Cold War. So the airports were built by us. Now, in the last few years, they've built a couple of airports that were financed by Denmark because Greenland really does want to be developed. It wants to have successful mining, successful tourism. They told me that when I was ambassador, and I worked to help them by getting resources from the State Department to make that come true, those dreams they had. But the fact is that the Chinese Communist Party tried to finance and build those airports that Denmark ended up financing for them because they were trying to pull Greenland into their Belt and Road initiative. China says, and this is the Chinese Communist Party, that they're a near polar nation, near Arctic nation, but there's no such thing. And they believe that because they have the population they do, that they're entitled to the Arctic riches, but they don't have any Arctic, land or sea. So they're very presumptuous.
Let me jump in because we've got a break. But so China is encroaching in the Arctic, and there's another strategic reason that the United States has got to do something with regard to this, and Greenland would be a good way to do that. Carla Sands will be with me for a few more minutes, so stick with us for more of Point of View.
It almost seems like we live in a different world from many people in positions of authority. They say men can be women and women men. People are prosecuted differently or not at all, depending on their politics. Criminals are more valued and rewarded than law-abiding citizens. It's so overwhelming, so demoralizing. You feel like giving up. But we can't. We shouldn't. We must not. As Winston Churchill said to Britain in the darkest days of World War II, never give in, never give in, never, 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 never yield to force, never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy. And that's what we say to you today. This is not a time to give in, but to step up and join Point of View in providing clarity in the chaos. We can't do it alone, but together, with God's help, we will overcome the darkness. Invest in biblical clarity today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Penna Dexter.
Ambassador Carla Sands with me for a few more minutes. I presumed on your time, Carla, but let me just ask you this question. We can talk a little bit after you have to go about some of the advantages of a relationship with Greenland. But I want to know from your experience there, what is Greenland's attitude to a closer relationship with the U.S.? You said that you sense positivity, but also, I guess, what about Denmark? Are they willing to make a change in the way they relate to this this huge and well-endowed island? Well, I guess Carla can't hear me. Our little technical issues are cropping up again, I think.
No, sorry.
Oh, hi,
sorry.
Carla. Hi, Carla. Did you hear my question?
Yes, I could. Denmark is very upset about this because Greenland makes Denmark a player. It's the world's largest island. It's very important, and it's geostrategic for the United States. We have a base on Greenland. It's above the Arctic Circle. It's our most northern base in the world. And so Denmark hates this. It's very upsetting. But the fact is, if they could defend it, they would. And if they could develop it, they would have. They haven't done anything. They've done as little as possible. They send around $600 million as a transfer payment to Greenland every year. But they benefit from Greenland a lot. They have, fishing. There's a lot of fishing around Greenland. That's the main export. All of the flights historically have gone through Denmark. The shipping has gone through Denmark historically. Now, I know Greenland wants to change that and be more independent, but they're very linked together, and there was oppressive things that Denmark did to the Greenlanders over the centuries. So Greenland doesn't really like Denmark that much. Denmark likes having Greenland. Greenland just wants development. They just want to have income for their people, have great paying jobs, and be secure. They really don't care where the money comes from. They just say money doesn't have there's no color to money. Money is money. They don't really care. And so they don't understand the national security implications. Perhaps the leaders do, but I'm not sure the folks do. So,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, United States is the only nation, friendly that can really secure the region. It's part of North America. This is Greenland now, and I think that President Trump will get to a good place with Denmark, which is a great NATO ally, and with Greenland, I think that he'll work out a deal. He's a deal maker, and it'll be a deal where everyone comes away, with something. But I do think that it's upsetting to the Danish people. They have an asset that they can't afford to own, basically.
Yeah. Oh, Carla, thank you for explaining that. I don't think people understood. And it does sound like that it could actually be good for all parties. And, if there's a president that can make that happen, it's probably President Trump.
Yeah, he'll get it to a good place. That's right, Penna.
All right,
Wonderful
Carla. I just want to thank you for staying a little longer and for your input here. And definitely, next time I have you on, I'm going to have you for a full hour. I'm going to find an hour of yours, and we're going to do it. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Penna. Take care.
All right. That is Carla Sands. She was ambassador to the Kingdom of Denmark. So she knows a lot about Greenland. And, the issue, ever since Inauguration Day, we haven't heard the issue of Greenland, but I think we will again. And so, just to recap a little bit of the advantages of having some sort of relationship, and I'm not necessarily saying buying, but perhaps just some other way of mutually benefiting one another. And also benefiting Denmark because, I guess Carla made the case that Denmark really couldn't afford to take full advantage of Greenland and its relationship with them. So the United States could afford that, and perhaps it could benefit both countries. But one thing that's there, you've got the Chinese encroaching in the Arctic, and So it would provide, having this a strategic relationship with Greenland would provide security against attacks from the north. And also, Greenland has a lot of raw materials, minerals like cobalt and copper and nickel, and China has a lot of these also, and they control the processing of them. And they want to remain in control of that, so they would love to, have that from Greenland also. But it would be beneficial to the United States to have those needed minerals. And then you also have Russia making little incursions in the area also. So you've got a security situation where the United States, we already have, I think we have some troops there, but I'm not sure if we still do. She mentioned that we did until the end of the Cold War. And so that is there. And so, another good reason, national security, having sort of a base of operation in the Arctic would be good. Trump is becoming more and more serious about this, about having some arrangement. And it sounds like the Greenlanders would benefit greatly, and probably he has to convince Denmark that it would be good for them too. And one other benefit that I read about was that it would provide a vital communications between the United States and Europe. And you could have a purchase, you could have a free association agreement, but it has been said that whoever controls Greenland will have an inside track on controlling the Arctic. So that's another very interesting part of it. Danish officials, though, if you kind of dig into this a little bit, CNN reports that they fear that Trump is much more serious about acquiring the territory. He did mention this in his first term, but then he was in the first term. But they're being warned by Trump allies and advisors that he's much more serious. And the ecosystem, one senior Danish official said, the ecosystem supporting this idea is totally different now than it was in 2019 when Trump first proposed it. This seems much more serious. And Trump has said we need Greenland for national security purposes. And then, of course, I didn't ask Ambassador Sands about this, but apparently there's some confusion on whether Greenland, whether Denmark has a legal right to the country. If they do, Trump says they should give it up because we need it for national security. And of course, as she said, it would benefit Greenland more than the relationship with Denmark does. Asked about Trump's comments, outgoing Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said that the idea expressed about Greenland is obviously not a good one, but maybe more important, it's not going to happen. I wouldn't put anything past Donald Trump. I really, truly wouldn't. And after hearing Ambassador Sands talk about the benefits to Greenland, to the U.S., and perhaps even to Denmark, that makes that even a little more apparent. Trump warned that Denmark could face steep tariffs if it does not give up control of Greenland. So, there may be a little bit of that kind of back and forth negotiating going on too. So anyway, Greenland possibility, not one of the things being talked about in these first 2 days of the Trump administration, but certainly something that will be discussed in the future, and that's certainly a possibility. And so, that's great. President Trump inherited a financial and monetary mess. This was written by Kevin Warsh last week in the Wall Street Journal. He's with the Hoover Institution. He's also a former member of the Federal Reserve Board. The federal government is the spending of the federal government's about 52% higher than in 2019, and the budget deficit has risen by $849 billion. Since January 2020, the national debt is up more than 50%. We have to remember this. So this is one of the, I think, election issues, and certainly something that the Trump administration and the U.S. Congress is expected to deal with. Congress and President Trump can cut inflation with, Kevin Warsh says, strong regulatory policies and certainly getting rid of a lot of regulations and also cutting back on government spending and certainly getting these tech titans on board. Shifting away from censorship is also something that he actually inherited. It all began to be discussed right before the inauguration. So that situation is going to be a lot better for this president. Well, next up, we are going to talk about something that was announced today, that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, will be banished from the federal government. It might take a little time, but maybe not so long as we think. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
One more segment here on Point of View, and I did promise, I forgot to open the phones. I did promise that you could make a comment if you wanted to on the incoming Trump administration or ask a question. So if you want to try to get through right now, I'm not even sure about our technical issues, so try. I didn't want you to think I forgot. You may not be able to get through because I'm just not sure about our technical issues, but also, we can't take any. Okay. All right. Never mind. Forget that. We'll do that another day. We'll let you weigh in some other day. I think I'm hosting next week because I do want to hear from you on what you're thinking here. I feel like a weight's been lifted, or a lot of weights have been lifted, and some regulations have been lifted. Maybe that's why. But here's another executive order that was already acted upon. Has to do with DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this article came out today. Layoffs loom as Trump administration orders federal DEI workers on leave. The administration took aim at DEI programs. They're throughout the government, by the way. And the employees will be placed on leave, and that are all the DEI employees in the departments that are advancing that in the federal government. They'll be placed on leave no later than today. The offices will be closed down by tonight. This directive will eventually lead to these employees being laid off or reassigned, but right now they're getting paid leave. And these executive orders, there are a couple of executive orders on DEI that he mentioned and announced on Monday. And this is, he called these programs radical and wasteful. They're wasteful. You pay these people a lot of money to implement this stuff, but it's also radical and detrimental because hiring people based on their race or their gender identity doesn't always get you the best people. It might get you good people, but it's not the criterion that should be used to for bringing in people that are going to do the country good. It's merit. That's what that should be the reason people are hired, because they either have good experience, they have good knowledge on the subject matter, and whatever department they're being hired for, not because they are a certain color or certain gender identity. Charles Ezell sent out the memorandum, and he's in the Office of Personnel Management in the government. He sent it to federal department and agency heads, instructing them to inform all employees of DE offices by 5 p.m. today. They're being placed on paid administrative leave, effective immediately. And agency heads must ask employees if they know of any efforts to disguise these programs. Some of them are being renamed so that they may escape the cutting of DEI. But they're going to try to dig into that and make sure that we don't have renamed DEI departments that are still existing in the federal government. So that's what's happening, and that was announced. And so some people are packing up their boxes right now, and they're going to get their paychecks. But dismantling DEI was the subject of Jason Riley's column in the Wall Street Journal today. And he said that President Trump, quote, wants to pivot from its predecessor's obsession with radical differences, as do millions of Americans of all political stripes. Biden called for equity, which for a long time ago, it used to mean equal treatment regardless of race, but it became a progressive euphemism for group preferences. And what it really means in practice is decriminalizing, discriminating. I'm sorry, can't read my own writing here. Discriminating to achieve racial balance. So it's discrimination. It's reverse discrimination in one sense. Discrimination used to be a bad thing against blacks or Hispanics or whatever, but now it's discriminating against whoever is in the majority, which is whites. And so the last administration did indeed, as President Biden announced early on, make equity the business of the whole of government. He said he wanted to do that. He did. That's one thing that President Biden really succeeded at. They brought DEI into just about every department of government. And that's what's been taking place. Diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI programs throughout the government, implementing mandates for hiring according to race and also gender identity. There's been a regime with regard to pronouns. And if you misgender someone with regard to their pronouns, you can face a lot of hostility and just, maybe some kind of punishment. President Trump got more support from minority voters than past Republican voters. So it's not as if the minorities are demanding DEI. I really think it's more of a totalitarian Marxist idea, and it's those people with those types of sensibilities that have been implementing these programs. Of course, it's all over the business world too, but many companies are now turning against it, and it's a good thing that the federal government is doing so. Jason Riley, of course, he's a black. You can tell. I read his columns all the time. He's wonderful, and he doesn't always write about these issues. He writes about all kinds of issues. He's a really, really smart guy, and he is very much against DEI, and many minorities are against this. Nearly half of Latinos and a quarter of black men voted for Donald Trump over Joe Biden. So this was the time. The time was right now to purge the government of this. And he says, Jason Riley in the Wall Street Journal says, this makes common sense. He says, changing the targets of government discrimination, say to whites, which is kind of what's been done, won't undo the past. There has been past discrimination, but that doesn't mean we should have present discrimination of another race. And it just makes no common sense. And finally, common sense, may begin to reign. The evidence has been piling up that the country wants to move past race in ways that the political left continues to resist. So there will be resistance on this, and they will have to make sure that some of the departments don't hide themselves away from this mandate, this directive from the federal government. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you for putting up with our couple of difficulties we had. We did miss out on one guest and hopefully a couple of guests, actually. So hopefully we'll be able to reschedule them. I'm sure we will. But thank you for putting up with that. And tomorrow, I don't remember who's hosting. Maybe Kirby will be back. I think he probably will be back, and I'm getting the thumbs up on that. And then on Friday, you'll have a lot of fun with the group that's going to be here on Friday, because just think how much is going to be announced in the next 2 days that are going to be fulfillments of some of these executive orders, policy taking place and being enacted very quickly. And so I just want to really thank you for listening today and putting up with the couple of glitches here, and also for just being part of this this program and supporting us. And thank you, Megan, so much for your work today. And Steve, this was a rough day, but you did a great job, and thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
We believe there is power in prayer. And that is why we have relaunched our Pray for America campaign, a series of weekly emails to unite Americans in prayer for our nation. Imagine if hundreds of thousands of Americans started praying intentionally together on a weekly basis. You can help make that a reality by subscribing to our Pray for America emails. Just go to pointofview.net and click on the Pray for America banner that's right there on the homepage. Each week you'll receive a brief news update, a specific prayer guide, and a free resource to equip you in further action. We encourage you to not only pray with us each week, but to share these prayers and the resources with others in your life. Join the movement today. Visit pointofview.net and click on the banner Pray for America right there at the top. That's pointofview.net. Let's pray together for God to make a difference in our land. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just wanted to tell you